Working on your own bow is not as difficult as it may seem. With the right tools and proper instruction, anyone can set up their own bow and tune it from start to finish. This video will go over all of the tools that you need to work on your own bow. And first, I'm going to show you what I keep in my portable bow box that I take on all of my hunting trips and all of my archery shoots just in case. And then I will show you what I keep in my home archery shop so that I can set up my bow to perfection. First thing that everybody needs to have, razor blades. I keep a full pack of razor blades and a razor in my archery toolbox. That way I can always change out D-loops, knock sets, cut any string that I need to tie in any of that stuff. I've always got it available. So I always keep that on me, and razor blades are cheap and they're sharp. So that's the easiest thing to keep in your bow box. Next, it's always good to have a lighter. That way you can burn the ends for your D-loops and knocking sets and for tying in peep sights. It's always good to have two just in case one runs out. All right. So the next things that you need to be able to set up and build your own bow is, first of all, D-loop material. So this is BCY number 23. BCY number 24 is probably the most common material. I prefer BCY number 23. It's soft, easy to tie, and it usually lasts for the lifetime of the string on the bow. I also use BCY Power Grip and BCY 3D servings in size .018. I tie this 3D stuff for my knock sets, and I tie the Power Grip for my peep sights. Never had an issue with anything coming loose, anything breaking. Once I tie it once, again, it's set for the life of the string. Also, just so you guys know, for the links for all of this product, you can find it in the description of this video. We've also created a PDF master list with all of the items that you need to work on your own bow. You can find that in the description below. Next, we'll grab our D-loop pliers. There's a lot of different variations of these. I just prefer the Easton D-loop pliers. They're extremely convenient if you're tying on lots of D-loops to stretch that D-loop and make sure that your knots are going to hold. You don't necessarily need this, but it is a nice to have item. I've done it in the past where I just take my release, hook it on the D-loop after I tie it, grab the string and pull it to tighten it. But again, this can tighten it a lot better and just more consistently. So add this to your arsenal if you'd like. The next thing that I keep in my portable bow box is this serving jig. So this is very simple, but this is what you use to replace the center serving on your bowstring. You know, a lot of times if you're shooting, getting some knock pinch, what'll happen is that serving string will separate over time, or it'll actually break and come off, and that can be a quick end to an archery shoot or a hunt if you have problems with that loosening. So I just take this same BCY Power Grip, is what I use, .018, and I'll put this in here. I'm not going to do it now because it takes a little bit of time, but I'll put it in the serving jig, and then I can use that to serve my string without a bow press, and I can do it on the go in the field or whenever I need to. Just need this, the razor blade, and the lighter, and you're good to go. I also keep a fletching jig, a fresh bottle of glue, primer pen, wraps, and fletchings, all in my portable bow box. And you know, I struggled for a long time getting my fletchings to actually stick on my arrows. I tried lots of different fletchings, lots of different glues, finally found a system that works. And now what I do is I just take a wrap. This is just like a reflective wrap. I cut it down short, so that's the length of my fletchings, and I make the wrap where I'm going to put the fletchings, fletch them on there using this process in the Bitzenberger jig, and I cannot rip these off. Like the wrap will rip off before the fletching comes off. So it's a very foolproof process. And as far as a jig goes, there's multiple different brands of jigs out there. I'm kind of partial to the Bitzenberger. It's just simple, straightforward. You can fletch any arrow on it. It does a perfect job as long as you do a perfect job. So you really don't need to go out and spend any more money on any fancier of a jig than a Bitzenberger, in my opinion. It'll get the job done. I also keep permanent markers, either black, gold, or silver, in my archery box. I use this to mark fletchings, mark wraps, number the arrows, also make marks on the string where I'm going to be putting the knocking point, and sometimes where I will be putting the peep sight. And you can use that marker to mark where it's at in the string. That way, if it ever does move for any reason, you know. So I always keep that in there. I also always have, I mean, probably everybody has this all the time, but I keep Allen wrenches, portable Allen wrenches. These two from all the way down to the smallest size, all the way up to the biggest size of everything you'll need for any bow setup that I've ever worked on right here. I keep the smaller one typically in my quiver. That way I've always got it. Always have the bigger one with me in my bow case or in my box. So if I need to make a bigger adjustment to tighten down a back bar on the stabilizer or anything like that, I can do it. Sometimes when you're setting up your bow, these are harder to get into position. And so I also keep just these L-shaped Allen wrenches. These are all standard Allen wrenches. They're not metric. Pretty much all USA archery products are made with standard size Allen wrenches, not the metric size. So I keep everything in standard, and I also have these so I can get into tight places. Again, from the smallest to the biggest, it'll cover everything. And then lastly, I also have just a portable hex wrench like this. Really, you don't have a lot of hex screws that you need to get at, but on certain bows, certain cams, they use hex screws for the modules in the cam. So like my Hoyt, I need this hex to be able to adjust the draw length in the module or the draw stop. So those are all extra things that I keep with me at all times, and you should too. For sight leveling, I always keep a small torpedo level. This isn't necessarily necessary if you have something like the Hamskea third axis level. I don't actually use this just to set the third axis. I'll also set the first and second axis on my sight depending on what sight I'm using by using this and attaching it to the string. Now I also have other tools that I use to help balance the bow while I use these tools, but I'll cover that later in the video. I also always keep a fluorescent or highly visible string, just like this green fluorescent paracord, in my case, and what I use this for is actually to set third axis leveling. I use this with a weight on the end to act as a plumb, and I kind of go over how to use this to set your third axis for shooting up and down out of a tree stand or on a mountain for tack shoot or whatever it might be. I showed this in the Ultimate Bow Build Masterclass, which is linked in the description below. A few measuring devices that I keep in my portable bow box. First of all, I keep a knock set tool. This is just the simple Easton knock square. Use this to clip on the string, find 90 degrees to the center of the burger button. That essentially gives you a good starting point for where to put your knocking point. It's not the end-all be-all. You don't just go off of that and say 1/8 inch high and you're set, but this is a good reference so that you can start your setup on your new bow the same every single time. I also keep just a tape measure in my bow. I can measure axle to axle. I can take any measurements on the string from peep sight to center of the arrow at full draw. From whatever it might be, I always just keep this handy. It's always a good idea to have a tape measure. That way you can measure things to make sure nothing's moving or everything's in the correct position that it needs to be. So outside of the normal glue that I keep in my archery box, I also keep hot melt in it as well to use to put in inserts. This works extremely well to glue in inserts depending on the type of arrow that you're shooting. I don't use it for the Easton hit inserts, just me personally, but they're great for any other insert or glue in points. This is the best glue to use in my opinion because you can just heat it up, pull it out, and replace it if you need to. It's always a good idea to have this along with your standard glue, whatever your preference is. The next thing every archer and bow hunter should have in their toolbox is a digital arrow scale. So this just is very simple, measures the arrow weight in grains, and I use this when I'm building my arrows mostly so that I can make each arrow as consistent as possible with the full dozen that I'm building at that time. So I want the least amount of grain variance or weight variance in my arrows. So I use this scale to measure and put the heavy point with the light arrow and the light point with the heavier arrow. That way they can get as close to the same as possible. So, and it's never going to be off very much, but the closer you can get them together, the better it is. So I recommend that you have one. For shot tuning, when you're kind of getting your bow to feel well, I always keep just extra stabilizer weights with me. I just have one big disc that I kind of use as a front disc sometimes if it's not too heavy. And then I've got 2s, 4s, 8s, and single weights that I'll use to kind of level out the back bar or add out or subtract from the front bar to find my optimal hold so that I can hold the steadiest and execute the best. The next thing I keep in my portable bow box is something that every archer and every bow hunter should have, in my opinion, if you want to work on your own bow. And it is a cable bow press. And I know this doesn't look like much, but I used this to set up and tune all of my bows for almost 10 years. And I could do everything with it. I could replace strings, I could sync cams, I could time cams, I could put in peep sights, I could adjust on the fly. I don't need a bench, I could do it anywhere. The other thing you need if you're shooting split limbs is the split limb adapters to go with it. It's pretty straightforward, it works extremely well. It's not as convenient as working at a bow press that's mounted on a bench, but trust me when I say you can do all of the adjustments you need right with this. So lastly, what I keep in my portable bow box is all of the extras that I take with me pretty much everywhere, mostly for arrow fixing. So I always have extra just standard nocks, which I shoot at Easton Axis, so X nocks. I always have lighted nocks, just extra lighted nocks so I can replace those out after I shoot them. I've always got extra fletchings, of course, with the fletching jig. I've got extra broadheads. This is just a case. All the broadheads are inside. And then I've got extra inserts for the arrows that I shoot. These are just the hit inserts. Of course, I've got the glue to go with it if I need it. And then I've also got extra feel points in case one bends or somebody needs extras, anything like that. These are just all good extra things to keep in your portable bow box. And I take this, again, everywhere I go for any big hunt or any archery shoot that I go on. All of this just fits in this simple box and I can carry it with me. Okay, so next is what I keep at home for working on arrows in my arrow setup. First is the arrow spinner. This is very important if you are building your own arrows. What it allows you to do is determine which end of the arrow is the wobbliest. Okay, so this isn't necessarily needed if you're not a crazy archery freak like myself, but if you want the most out of your setup, an arrow spinner is definitely should be on your list. Along with that is an arrow saw. So this saw here is not incredibly expensive, but it does work extremely well, and it does allow me to cut my own arrows. You don't have to have your own arrow saw. You can go to a pro shop, you can have somebody cut them most of the time for free or a very small fee. But what you do, the benefit of having an arrow saw is so that when you get the full length shafts and you're going to cut them down, when you spin your arrow, you can locate which end of the shaft is the most wobbliest, and you cut off more from that end than you do from the other end. That way you can take a 6/1000th straightness arrow, cut both ends, and get it down to a 1/1000th straightness arrow. That can be a big difference in price if you're buying from a 6/1000th arrow or a 1/1000th arrow. So if you want to be more anal and get more consistency out of your arrows, get an arrow spinner and get an arrow saw. The last thing that you'll need if you're building your own arrows is basically an arrow squaring tool. So I just take this after I've cut the arrows, I'll set the arrow in the end of this, put it against the sandpaper, and just roll it, and it just squares off the end of the arrow. That way it's perfectly 90 degrees with the shaft, and any point or knock sits perfectly against the arrow all the way around it. That way there's no inconsistencies with it. Again, all of this stuff isn't necessarily needed, but if you want to take the next steps to build your arrows as consistently as possible, I highly recommend having it. The last tools I'll show you is what I keep at home at my own archery bench that pretty much stays there. It doesn't travel with me, but it allows me to make finer tuning adjustments and really fine tune my setup to get the most performance possible out of my bow. By using this equipment, you can make your setup so much more forgiving and so much more accurate based on your shooting. And know that forgiveness doesn't mean that your bow is automatically going to shoot perfect. It just means that the arrow is going to hit behind your sight pin, but only if you have good shooting form and execution to go with it. The first thing you should have at your home archery bench is a homemade drawboard. A homemade drawboard makes syncing your cams and setting up your bow so much easier to do. Of course, you can sync your cams by having somebody watch them and checking the gaps or seeing which one is pressing the cable harder, but by using a drawboard, you can ultimately fine-tune your setup so that the stops on a dual cam bow or a hybrid cam bow come around and touch those cables at exactly the same time. There is no other way to do it. You can record it with a video camera, you can have somebody watch, but there is no other precise way to do it without a drawboard. For as cheap and easy as it is to make, everybody should have one. The second thing you should have at your home archery bench is a table-mounted bow press. Now, if you have a cable press, You don't necessarily need the table-mounted bow press. It's just so much quicker, easier, efficient, and safer to use a table-mounted bow press than it is to use a cable press if you can afford it. So there's lots of great brands out there. The most important thing is to know whatever press you do get, it works for the bow that you're shooting. Some bows have different styles. Some presses only fit certain bows. So make sure whatever press you do get, it matches your bow or can basically press your bow. The last thing that I keep at my home bow bench is a bow vise. I don't use this to put the bow in to work on the bow when I'm tying in D-loops or peep sight or anything like that. I simply only use this to level the first and second axis on my sights. So I can use this to level the bow, hold it perfectly, and then make the side adjustments as needed. But it's more of a luxury item. You don't have to have one. You can use door jams and other methods to level your bow to make those adjustments on your sights. But if you do have one, you can really fine-tune that first and second axis adjustment on your sight and get it perfect. That way you know you don't have any issues with it. So again, just kind of depends on your budget and what you want to spend. Now that you know all of the tools you need to be able to work on your own bow, there's only one thing left, and it's the most important part. That's knowledge. Doing it is not hard. It's knowing what to do and what order to do it in that is what's important. It took me many years of tinkering, setting up, and tuning hundreds, if not thousands of bows in order to master this process. Knowing that it took me years to learn everything that was needed, I knew I needed to take all of the information that I had learned and compile it in a video series that outlines a step-by-step process that anyone can follow to set up and tune their own setup. This is why I've created the online Ultimate Bow Build Masterclass online course. It's simple, straightforward. It has everything you need to know, everything you need to do to set up and tune your own bow from start to finish at your own pace. This course is straightforward, to the point, giving you no extra fluff and only giving you the specific information you need to set up your bow to be as forgiving and as accurate as possible. You can find the course along with all of the tools that I mentioned in this video in the video description below. I've also created a master list of every tool that we mentioned along with the course that you can view in the description as well. If you found this video helpful, please let us know by liking and commenting below. And if you have any questions at all, please let us know. We are always happy to help. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.